$35 million for the grieving widow. And a pile of rotting wood perched precariously on the edge of a cliff for the biological daughter of the deceased. The atmosphere in the offices of Wilson and Partners on the 40th floor felt even colder than the relentless November rain shrouding the city of Seattle outside. Daisy, 15 years old, sat swallowed up in an oversized leather chair, both hands gripping the frayed hem of her worn hoodie. She felt like an ink stain marring the perfect painting of this room. Across from her sat Helen, Daisy's stepmother, a renowned architect, a woman who regularly appeared on the cover of Architectural Digest with her billion-dollar projects. Today, she wore an immaculate white suit, her face cold as if carved from marble, revealing not a trace of grief or triumph. According to the final wishes of my client. Attorney Wilson adjusted his gold-rimmed glasses, his voice as flat and mechanical as a machine. Mrs. Helen Vance shall inherit the entire portfolio of downtown Seattle real estate, the mansion on Mercer Island, and full control of the family trust. Daisy curled her lips into a crooked, bitter smile. She knew it. Her father had been completely bewitched by this woman, and as for Daisy Vance, Wilson paused, turning to the final page thin as tissue paper. She shall inherit the property designated Lot 42B, commonly known as Cabin Number 4, located in the eastern foothills. Cabin Number 4? Daisy blurted out, her voice cracking in disbelief. You've got to be kidding me. That's the rundown storage shack my dad planned to demolish last year. Helen remained perfectly still, her gaze fixed on the empty space beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows, where the Space Needle loomed faintly in the fog. She did not even bother to glance at her husband's daughter. That is a legally binding will, Daisy, Helen said at last, her voice cold and sharp like clashing metal. Accept it, or refuse it. Your choice. You think I need your charity? Daisy shot to her feet, the chair crashing backward. You take everything of value and toss me a leftover bone to shut me up? Daisy, please calm down, Attorney Wilson hurriedly intervened, sliding a thick envelope toward her. This is not an ordinary house. Your father left very specific instructions. Go and see it before making your decision. Daisy snatched the envelope, shot Helen a look full of hatred, and stormed out of the office. She swore that if this was some kind of joke, she would sue that woman down to the very last cent. 2 hours later, Daisy's old electric car growled as it climbed the muddy trail leading deep into the temperate rainforest. Massive Douglas firs pierced the thick fog overhead, forming a dark, oppressive green tunnel. The GPS announced. You have arrived. Daisy slammed the brakes. The car skidded across wet leaves before coming to a stop. She stepped out and immediately, her breath caught in her chest. What stood before her was not a house. It was an architectural nightmare. What the hell is this? Daisy muttered, her eyes wide open. A modern structure of wood and glass. But it did not stand upright. The entire house leaned at a terrifying angle at least 15 degrees. It looked like a drunk staggering on the verge of collapse. There was no sign of a sinking foundation. No evidence of natural disaster. It had been built this way. Rage exploded inside Daisy, scorching her face. This was the ultimate humiliation. A world-famous architect like Helen had left her stepdaughter a construction failure, a catastrophic design flaw she wanted hidden away. She wanted Daisy to live inside a crooked cage so she could laugh at her. You bastard! Daisy screamed, her voice echoing off the cliff walls before dissolving into the howling wind. She spun around, ready to climb back into her car and leave immediately. She would never set foot inside this grotesque mousetrap. But just as her hand touched the door handle, a sleek black sedan silently rolled forward, blocking her escape. Attorney Wilson stepped out, a leather-bound folder in his hands. Had he taken a shortcut to get here before her? Or had he known she would try to run? Where do you think you're going, Daisy? Wilson asked calmly, his tone infuriatingly composed. I'm not accepting this trash. Daisy snarled, pointing at the tilted house. Tell Helen I'll see her in court. I'd rather sleep under a bridge than live in that freakish thing about to collapse. I'm afraid you don't have that option, Wilson said, opening the folder and pulling out a document stamped in bright red. This is the residency clause attached to the inheritance. What clause? Daisy narrowed her eyes suspiciously. To retain ownership of this land and, more importantly, to keep access to the college scholarship fund your father left you, you are required to live in this house. For 7 consecutive nights. Daisy let out a dry laugh. 7 nights? In that crooked house? You must be joking. Azavaril, I'm not. Wilson glanced at his watch. The rule begins tonight. You are not permitted to leave the house's perimeter for more than 2 hours per day. Surveillance cameras have been activated. If you give up or exceed the allowed time away, the entire property and scholarship fund will be immediately forfeited to the state. You will be left with nothing. Daisy stood frozen. The cold wind cut through her thin jacket, but the chill inside her was far worse. This was not an inheritance. This was a prison, a sick psychological trial Helen had designed specifically to torment her. Wilson extended a cold bundle of metal keys. Do you accept, or will you sign the waiver right now? Daisy stared at the keys, then at the house leaning defiantly over the cliff. Her fury transformed into burning fuel. Did Helen think she would run away in fear? Did she think Daisy was weak, useless? Give them to me. Daisy yanked the keys from the old lawyer's hand. She clenched her teeth, her eyes blazing as she stared at the monstrous house. Tell Helen I won't just live here for 7 days. I'll live long enough to watch her fall. Attorney Wilson gave a small shrug, said nothing, and turned back to his car. Daisy stood alone in the ancient forest, gripping the keys until her knuckles turned white. She turned to face cabin number 4. Under the dim twilight, the slanted house seemed to sneer at her, waiting to devour the small prey that had stepped into its trap. The heavy oak door slammed shut behind Daisy, sealing her inside cabin number 4. The automatic lock clicked into place like the bolt of a solitary confinement cell. Immediately, Daisy's stomach twisted, not from hunger, not from fear, but from gravity. Outside, the 15-degree tilt looked bizarre. Inside, it was a form of vestibular torture. The floor was not level. It sloped sharply toward the massive glass wall overlooking the dark abyss below. Daisy staggered forward a step, her hands groping for support. The sensation was exactly like standing on the deck of a sinking ship in the middle of a storm, made worse by the fact that this ship was perfectly still. What the hell? Daisy groaned, clutching her head as dizziness set in. Does she want me puking my guts out in here? She forced herself toward the open kitchen. Everything, the sofa, dining table, even the refrigerator, looked normal at first glance, but on closer inspection, their legs had been bolted or cut so their surfaces remained level, completely contradicting the slanted floor beneath them. The mismatch between what she saw and what her sense of balance felt made Daisy's brain scream in protest. Her throat parched after the outburst of anger. Daisy opened the refrigerator and pulled out a carton of orange juice. Her hands trembling, she poured it into a glass and slammed it down onto the marble kitchen countertop. At least there's something to drink, she muttered. But she was wrong. The countertop was slanted too. The moment Daisy let go, the glass immediately slid away like a figure skater, picking up speed and shooting straight down to the floor. Crash. Orange juice splashed everywhere, flowing into a small river, obediently following the laws of physics as it ran straight toward the glass wall at the far end of the house. Fantastic. Daisy shouted, her voice echoing through the empty house. Just fantastic. Thank you, Helen. You're a genius. She collapsed onto the floor, her back against the legs of the dining table that had been bolted into place. Outside, night had fully fallen. The characteristic forest rain of Seattle began to pound heavily, lashing against the roof. And that was when the sounds began. Creak. Creak. The wind whistled through the gaps in the slanted structure, creating horrifying noises, like the wooden frame was groaning, about to splinter apart. Daisy curled in on herself. She imagined the entire structure sliding off the cliff and plunging into the 1,000-foot abyss below. She wants to drive me insane. Daisy whispered, her voice trembling but filled with hatred. She wants me to be scared, wants me to give up and run back crying for forgiveness. She wants to steal the last piece of this land. She pulled out her phone. 10% battery. But her rage was fully charged. Daisy opened the TikTok app. If Helen wanted to play psychological torture, Daisy would play reputation destruction. Daisy turned on the flashlight and propped her phone against a box of tissues, the only thing with enough friction not to slide away. She took a deep breath, smoothed her messy hair, then adjusted her expression from fear to steely outrage. Action. Hi everyone, Daisy said to the camera, her voice hardening. Do you know what it feels like to live in a house designed by Architect of the Year? Let me show you the masterpiece my stepmother, the great Helen Vance, forced me to live in to receive my inheritance. To enter, she picked up the phone and filmed a close-up of the steeply slanted floor. She took an apple from the fruit bowl and set it down on the floor. The apple shot off like a bullet and smacked into the wall with a thud. See? Daisy sneered into the lens. This is not art. This is a death trap. She dumped me in here, a house with a serious technical defect, ready to collapse at any moment. She wants me to give up so she can seize the assets my father left behind. The wind outside let out a long, mournful howl, as if echoing Daisy's words. Do you hear that? Daisy whispered dramatically. That's the house crying for help. Or maybe it's the sound of Helen's conscience slowly dying. Share this video, everyone. Let the world see the true face of the woman in the white suit. Daisy hit the upload button. The video, titled, The Truth About My Architect Stepmom, Forcing Her Stepdaughter to Live in a House About to Collapse, began uploading. She lay down on the rock-hard sofa, still clutching her phone, staring at the progress bar inching forward. Her heart pounded. This was the sweetest revenge. Helen might have money, power, and great lawyers. But Daisy had Gen Z, she had the power of the online community. A ding sounded. The video was live. Just 10 minutes later, Daisy's phone began vibrating violently. Oh my God, look at that house. She's insane. One comment popped up. Sue her. This is abuse. Another wrote, boycott Helen Vance. Revoke that witch's license immediately. Daisy watched the view count jump, 1,000, 5,000, 50,000. It was increasing exponentially. A triumphant smile spread across the young girl's face in the middle of the house, tilting precariously in the stormy night. Good, Daisy said to the glowing screen of her phone. Let's see tomorrow morning, when the whole world wakes up and sees this defective product of yours, if you can still keep that icy expression, Helen. She closed her eyes, trying to sleep while clinging tightly to the arm of the sofa so she wouldn't roll down the slanted floor. She didn't know that the post button she had just pressed was not only an attack on Helen, but also the spark that would burn her own escape route to the ground the next day. 1.5 million views. Daisy opened her eyes on the morning of the third day, and the massive number flashing on her phone screen hit her immediately. The back pain from sleeping on the slanted sofa all night seemed to vanish instantly. She had won. The comment section was flooded with curses aimed at Helen Vance. You're finished, Helen. Daisy sneered, stretching comfortably, ignoring the fact that she almost slipped and fell flat on her face on the steeply slanted floor. Just then, the piercing sound of a siren shattered the stillness of the old forest. Oh. 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 Daisy rushed to the glass door. A white pickup truck bearing the logo of King County was parked abruptly out front, the warning lights on its roof spinning wildly, bathing the leaf-strewn yard in red. The media's here already. Daisy adjusted her hair, bracing herself for a tear-soaked interview to play the perfect victim. But when the door swung open, the person standing there was not a reporter. It was a heavy-set middle-aged man in a khaki uniform, holding a tablet, his expression grave as if he had just discovered a bomb. "Are you Daisy Vance?" the man asked, his booming voice offering no greeting. "That's me." Daisy crossed her arms, lifting her chin. "You're here to rescue me from this trap, right? I'm the one who posted the video exposing." "I know who you are," he cut her off, raising the tablet. On the screen was Daisy's TikTok video. "I'm Inspector Miller from the King County Department of Building and Planning. Thank you for voluntarily providing evidence of a violation of building safety codes." The smile on Daisy's lips froze. "What? What evidence?" "In this video," Miller pointed at the screen, scrubbing to the part where the apple shot across the floor. "You state that this structure is about to collapse and a death trap. Under Section 108 of the International Building Code as adopted by the state of Washington, I am required to take immediate action." He pulled a roll of tape and a bright red notice from his pocket, printed in bold black letters, "Unsafe to a cup UI." Daisy's heart skipped a beat. She stammered, "Wait, what do you mean? What are you going to do?" "Seal the house," Miller said flatly, tearing off the backing of the red notice. "You have 15 minutes to gather your personal belongings and leave. This house is prohibited from occupancy until a technical reassessment is completed." "No. You can't do this," Daisy screamed, rushing forward to block the door. If she was forced out, she would violate the 7-night rule. She would lose her inheritance. She would lose her college tuition. She would lose everything. "Move aside, girl." Miller shoved her arm away decisively. "Didn't you say it was about to collapse? Do you want to stay inside and get crushed?" I was exaggerating. Just for views." Daisy panicked, grabbing the inspector's sleeve. "It's still fine. I slept here for 2 nights. Please, don't post that notice." "Too late. Your video was sent directly to our department's public tip line. The public is putting pressure on us to act to protect the victim, which is you." Miller raised his hand, about to slap the red tag notice, onto the expensive oak door. It was a death sentence for Daisy's future. She had dug her own grave with her own foolish glee. "Stop that hand, you bureaucratic bastard." A thunderous shout rang out from the bushes. Both Daisy and Miller flinched and turned around. An elderly man, his beard and hair completely white, wearing a striped shirt covered in sawdust and pine resin, was stepping out from the forest. He looked like an old bear just awakened from hibernation, clutching a battered, yellowed bundle of documents. "Ray?" Daisy whispered. He was the eccentric neighbor who lived in a wooden shack 2 miles away, whom her father had once mentioned. "Who are you?" Inspector Miller frowned, his hand still hovering over the red notice. "I'm Raymond Cole, a retired structural engineer, and the man who supervised the construction of this project 15 years ago." Ray strode forward, yanking the red paper straight out of Miller's hand, to the inspector's astonishment. "You have no authority to seal it off. You, obstructing an officer is a serious offense, old man," Miller growled. "This house is leaning 15 degrees. It violates every stability code there is. It is not an ordinary residential house." Ray slammed the stack of documents down hard onto the hood of Miller's pickup truck. "Open your eyes and read the permit. This is registered as a habitable art installation. It was granted a special permit under landscape preservation regulations." Daisy stood frozen, staring at the heated exchange between the two men. An art installation? Landscape preservation? Had her father and Helen built this monstrous thing as a work of art? Miller picked up the documents and flipped through a few pages. The scowl on his face softened slightly, though suspicion still lingered. "This outdated permit says the tilt was intentional," Miller snorted, pointing at the house. But after 15 years, who can guarantee the load-bearing structure is still safe? The girl's video shows the floors are slippery and the furniture isn't secured. It's still a hazard. I'll prove it's safe. Ray snapped. I know every single bolt in this house. Miller thought for a moment, then tucked the red notice back into his jacket pocket. He checked his watch, then looked at Daisy with a mix of pity and mockery. Fine. Because of the special permit, I'll temporarily suspend the sealing order. But, he raised one finger, his voice hard. You have exactly 24 hours. By 9 o'clock tomorrow morning, I want a current structural assessment report proving that this tilt is not caused by subsidence and that the house is still safe for human habitation. Otherwise, he looked Daisy straight in the face. I'll be back with an emergency demolition order. And when that happens, you won't just lose the house, you'll be paying for the cleanup of this pile of rubble as well. Miller climbed into his truck and slammed the door shut. The pickup turned around, leaving behind a cloud of dust. Daisy stood there, her limbs weak and shaky. She had narrowly escaped disaster, but the noose was still hanging over her head. Uncle Ray. Daisy turned to her neighbor, her voice barely above a whisper. Thank you. I don't know what I would have done if. Don't thank me yet, Ray cut in, throwing her a sharp, disappointed look. You've just done the stupidest thing imaginable, kid. You think you were getting back at Helen? You almost burned down your father's life's work. My father's life's work? Daisy stared at him, stunned. My dad hated this place. He was going to tear it down. Who told you that? Ray shook his head in exasperation and shoved the folder into Daisy's hands. Come with me. We have to crawl under the house. If you want to keep this place standing past tomorrow, you need to know what it's really standing on. Under the house? Daisy glanced down at the yawning abyss beneath the slanted floor. That's right, Ray said, already heading toward the edge of the cliff, where a narrow trail led downward. Down there, so you can see just how ignorant you've been. The damp, moldy smell of rain-soaked forest soil hit Daisy full in the face as she reluctantly crawled after Ray beneath the house. The late afternoon sunlight slanted through the dense fir canopy, casting long, eerie beams across the dark space beneath the massive structure. Watch your head, Ray's muffled voice echoed from ahead, mixed with the clanking of metal. If you smash your skull into a load-bearing beam, your head will crack before this house ever does. Daisy grimaced, brushing away spiderwebs, her knees aching as she crawled over cold gravel and stone. She was still reeling from the confrontation with Inspector Miller, but curiosity was beginning to overpower her fear. Uncle Ray, why do we have to crawl down here? Daisy asked, her voice echoing in the cramped space. Wasn't it dizzy enough up there? So you can see your own ignorance. Ray replied curtly, stopping beneath the living room, the point of greatest tilt. Turn on your flashlight, city girl. Take a good look at what you just called garbage on TikTok. Daisy pulled out her phone and turned on the flashlight. The white beam cut through the darkness, and instantly, her jaw dropped. She had imagined rotting wooden posts, cracked brick footings from subsidence. But no. What lay before her was a mechanical marvel. What is this? Daisy stammered, unable to believe her eyes. Instead of ordinary vertical supports, the entire house rested on a system of massive I-beams of steel, black, gleaming, and cold. They did not plunge straight into the ground, but extended outward from the solid limestone mountainside behind it, functioning like enormous lever arms straining to support the weight of a house deliberately tipping forward. It looked like the steel spine of a tyrannosaurus, using all its muscular strength to hold its balance at the edge of the cliff. This is a suspended cantilever structure. Ray slapped his palm against a steel beam as thick as a man's torso, producing a sharp, authoritative clang. Your father and Helen didn't build this house crook because of a technical mistake. They calculated it to lean at exactly 15 degrees. Daisy crawled closer and laid her hand on the icy steel. Its solidity traveled through her fingertips. There wasn't a single trace of rust. Not a single gap. But why? Daisy turned to Ray, her eyes wide with confusion. Why go to all this trouble to do something so insane? Why not build it straight like normal people? Ray didn't answer right away. He rummaged in the pocket of his faded shirt and pulled out a worn leather-bound notebook, stuffed among messy technical drawings. Take it, Ray tossed the notebook to Daisy. Your father's construction journal. Page 142. Read it. With trembling hands, Daisy opened the notebook. Her father's familiar, slanted handwriting appeared under the flashlight, making her heart tighten. The date written there was 5 years ago. October 12. The northeast winter winds are starting to arrive. Helen and I argued again. She wants to use hydraulic jacks to lift the house, restore a level plane to the floor. She said, "You're insane. Daisy will hate it. She'll get dizzy. She'll think we're freaks. Please, make it straight again." Daisy stopped breathing. Helen wanted to straighten it? She kept reading, tears beginning to blur the hastily written lines. But I said, "No, Helen. Absolutely not. She needs to see it. Balance does not mean standing upright. Sometimes, to preserve the most precious things, we are forced to lean. Daisy is smart enough to understand that. Don't fix it. Let it lean. That's the only way." Daisy closed the notebook, feeling as if someone had punched her hard in the chest. Dad. Dad was the one who insisted it had to lean? Daisy whispered, her voice breaking. I thought it was Helen. I thought she wanted to torture me. Ray sneered, a bitter smile hidden in his thick beard. Helen is the chief architect, but your father was the one who made the final decision on this design. Helen cried for 3 nights straight because she was afraid you wouldn't be able to adapt. She redesigned the entire interior, custom making every table leg, every chair so you could live here. She accepted a warning from the Architecture Council for violating standard regulations, just to comply with your father's wishes. Then why was Dad so stubborn? Daisy screamed, her confusion turning into utter frustration. To preserve something precious. What exactly? The view of that damn cliff. Not the cliff. Ray shook his head, his gaze drifting toward the distance, where darkness swallowed the space beneath the house. You're looking in the wrong place, kid. You only see the house tilting downward. You never once asked yourself what it's tilting to avoid. You are looking in the wrong place. Avoid what? Daisy frowned, crawling along Ray's line of sight toward the outer edge of the steel beam system. Your father forbade me from telling you, Ray sighed, brushing dust off his pants. He wanted you to figure it out yourself. But with your hot temper and a phone that shoots TikTok faster than your brain works, I'm afraid you'd call in a bulldozer to flatten this place before you ever understood. Taxdowners. He pointed downward, to where the roof overhang extended the farthest, shielding a deep, sunken patch of land completely invisible from the house above. Go out there, Ray jerked his chin. Crawl to the edge of that steel beam and look down into that pit. See what this $1 million house is bowing to. Daisy swallowed. The edge of the steel beam hung precariously over the abyss. But an intense curiosity, like a powerful stimulant, drove her forward. She crawled out, her heart pounding violently in her chest. The wind howled past her ears, icy cold. She shone her flashlight into the pitch-black void directly beneath the slanted floor. And when the beam of light reached the bottom of the pit, Daisy didn't scream. She froze. The flashlight in her hand trembled violently, its beam flickering over something rough, ancient, and immense hidden in the darkness, absolutely protected by the massive structure above. Oh my God! Daisy whispered, her breath turning into mist. It wasn't stone. It wasn't gold. It was an answer she had never expected. The flashlight in Daisy's hand stopped trembling, locked onto a single point at the bottom of the deep pit. What lay coiled in the damp darkness was not gold, nor some dark family secret of the Vances. It was a living organism. A massive tree root system, rough and gnarled, twisted together like ancient pythons emerging from the earth, completely occupying the space meant for a reinforced concrete foundation. Daisy squinted, trying to see through the layer of decaying leaves. "What is that? A dead tree?" "Not dead," Ray said, his voice dropping, carrying an unusual reverence. "It's alive. And it's breathing right under your feet." The old man reached over, took the flashlight from Daisy's hand, and aimed the beam upward, tracing the mold-stained trunk rising from the pit, threading through a meticulously designed gap between the floor and the cliff face, until its canopy spread outward, blending into the old forest. "This is a Gary oak," Ray said. "The rarest heritage tree species in the Pacific Northwest. But this one, it mutated. Its taproot doesn't grow deep downward. It rises to the surface and spreads horizontally, right into the central point of this lot." Daisy frowned, brushing dirt from her sleeve. Disappointment began to creep in. She had expected a more earth-shattering secret than a mutated tree. "So what?" Daisy jutted her chin out, her voice still edged with resentment. "Are you trying to tell me Helen built this crooked house just because she's some fanatical environmental activist? She'd rather make her stepdaughter suffer than cut down a wild tree?" "A wild tree?" Ray snorted, his laughter echoing beneath the dark house. "Kid, you have eyes but you don't know how to see. Crawl down there. Right beneath the base of the tree. There's something you need to see with your own eyes." "I'm not going down there. It's filthy." Daisy backed away. "Get down there," Ray shouted, the force of his voice making Daisy jump. "Get down there and read the brass nameplate hidden under those leaves. Don't let ignorance kill you a second time." Overpowered by the old man's resolve, Daisy bit her lip and reluctantly slid down the slick dirt slope. She clung to protruding roots, inching her way toward the base of the ancient oak. The rich smell of earth filled her nostrils. At the thickest primary root, a small metal plaque was nailed to the trunk. It was dulled by time, half covered in moss. Daisy reached out and wiped the mud from the surface of the plaque. The engraved letters gradually emerged under the weak flashlight beam. Daisy squinted to read. And then, the world around her seemed to stop spinning. "Planted by Sarah on the day my daughter Daisy turned 1 year old. May you grow strong and take root deeply like this tree. I love you, Daisy." "Mom. Mom." Daisy whispered, her voice shattering into fragments. She touched the name, Sarah. That was her biological mother's name. The mother who had died of illness when Daisy was only 5 years old. Her memories of her mother were only faint fragments, but this name, this love, were real. "Your mother secretly planted it here, on the very day your father bought this land to build a vacation house." Ray's voice came from behind her, no longer harsh but heavy with sorrow. "She said this was the life she was leaving behind for you." Daisy trembled, gripping the rough bark. Hot tears spilled over, dripping onto the cold brass plate. "But why?" Daisy turned to Ray, her face soaked with tears. "Why does the house have to tilt?" Ray sat down beside her and pointed upward, toward the black steel beam straining to hold the massive structure above. "Look closely at where the roots are positioned," Ray explained slowly, like teaching a child. "This root system sits exactly where the standard load-bearing foundation piles should be. If Helen had built this house upright like normal, she would have had to dig the foundation. She would have had to sever this entire primary root." Daisy froze. "Sever the root means killing the tree." "Exactly," Ray nodded. "When your father showed Helen the original design, she came here to survey the site. She saw the tree. She saw your mother's nameplate. And she tore the upright house design to shreds on the spot." Daisy stared up at the ceiling, which was the floor of the living room where she had just filmed her TikTok video cursing Helen. Helen told your father, I can't cut it down, Ethan. That's Daisy's mother. If I cut this tree to build a beautiful house, Daisy will never forgive me. And I would never forgive myself. She really said that. Daisy stammered. She did, Ray said firmly. Helen spent 6 months redesigning everything from scratch. She created this expensive cantilever system, using steel leverage to suspend the house, tilting it 15 degrees to completely avoid the root system. She accepted turning the house into a physical disaster in the eyes of outsiders, accepted being mocked by everyone, accepted tripling the cost, all just to keep this tree alive. Daisy felt as if someone were squeezing the air out of her chest. She looked up at the house looming above her. It was not flawed. It did not want to collapse. It was bowing. That 15-degree tilt was not negligence. It was the greatest gesture of respect one woman could offer to her deceased romantic rival. Helen had bent steel itself, bent even the most rigid principles of architecture, solely to protect the only relic Daisy's mother had left behind, and yet. Daisy sobbed, burying her face in her hands. And yet what did I do? I went online and cursed her. I called her a greedy witch. You didn't just curse her. Ray sighed, standing up and brushing off his pants. You incited the entire world to stone the only person who had quietly protected your past for the last 10 years. Helen never told you, because she was afraid you would feel indebted. She wanted you to receive this house and discover your mother's love on your own. Daisy's phone vibrated violently in her pocket. Another notification from TikTok. No doubt more praise for victim Daisy and more curses hurled at villain Helen. But now, each vibration felt like a knife stabbing into Daisy's heart. She was not the victim. She was the executioner. Uncle Ray, Daisy sprang to her feet, wiping her tears with fierce determination. We have to get out of here. I need to see Helen. Right now. For what? Ray raised an eyebrow. To ask for more money? No, Daisy shook her head, her eyes blazing with overwhelming remorse but also firm resolve. To save the house. And to save my stepmother's honor before it's too late. Daisy slammed through the doors of Wilson and Partners like a Category 10 storm. She was still wearing the mud-caked clothes from crawling beneath the house, her hair soaked and plastered to her head, creating a grotesque contrast with the luxurious, money-scented atmosphere of the 40th floor. The secretary tried to stop her, but Daisy shoved past and burst open the mahogany doors of the main conference room. Inside, Helen and Attorney Wilson sat facing each other, the air between them heavy as lead. Stacks of legal documents were strewn across the table. Daisy? Helen looked up. Her usually sharp eyes were now bloodshot from lack of sleep. She showed no surprise, only exhaustion. What are you doing here? The 7 days aren't over. If you leave the house for more than 2 hours, you know the consequences. I don't care about that damn rule anymore. Daisy shouted, her voice breaking as she threw the keys to cabin number 4 onto the glossy glass table. The metallic clatter rang sharply. Are you giving up? Attorney Wilson frowned, his hand pausing over the file. If you give up, the land will be forfeited to the state. You'll lose everything. I'm not giving up. I came to demand justice for her. Daisy pointed at Helen, her finger trembling. Why? Why didn't you tell me about the tree? Why did you let me think you were an evil witch forcing me to live in that slanted house? Helen remained silent, turning her face toward the window, where rain continued to lash violently against the glass. Her silence only drove Daisy more frantic. Answer me. Do you enjoy playing the villain that much? That's enough, Daisy. Attorney Wilson slammed his hand on the table, his shout making Daisy flinch. He stood up, his face flushed with anger, utterly unlike his usual composed demeanor. Do you think you have the right to scream here? Do you have any idea what Helen is facing because of your idiotic video? Wilson grabbed a thick file and slid it forcefully across the table toward Daisy. Open it. Look at the assets you think Helen has been stealing. With trembling hands, Daisy flipped open the first page. They were not profitable investment portfolios. They were invoices. Long rows of glaring red numbers. What is this? Daisy murmured, her vision blurring at the figures. Structural risk insurance premiums, $120,000 a year? Steel cantilever system maintenance fees, $50,000? You thought the trust fund your father left was for Helen to buy luxury handbags or travel around Europe? Wilson sneered bitterly. Every cent of that money, plus 40% of Helen's personal annual income, goes straight into that cabin number 4. Daisy looked up, stunned. Why? Why does it cost so much? Because the house is tilted, miss. Wilson snapped. No insurance company wants anything to do with a house that defies gravity. They classify it as a level 1 risk. Helen has to pay insurance premiums 20 times higher than normal just to keep that house legally standing, so your mother's damn tree won't be cut down. Daisy turned to Helen. The woman of steel still sat there, motionless, absently twisting her wedding ring on her ring finger. And that's not all. Wilson flipped to another page, a document stamped by the Washington State Architects Association. Read it. Third warning for violation of safe design principles. Do you know what her colleagues call Helen? The madwoman of Seattle. They say she's lost her mind for building that monstrosity. I didn't know. Daisy whispered, feeling as though the ground beneath her feet were collapsing. She sacrificed the reputation she spent her entire life building, accepted ridicule, drained her own finances, all to keep a promise to your father, to preserve that oak tree for you. Wilson pointed directly at Daisy, his voice trembling with fury. And you, what did you do? You went online and screamed that she was greedy and cruel. You incited the masses to boycott her. Daisy staggered back, bumping into the edge of the table. She remembered the TikTok comments, number boycott Helen, number revoke her license. Our office phones have been ringing non-stop since this morning, Wilson said, his voice dropping into a menacing calm. Partners are canceling contracts with Helen. If the firm goes bankrupt, Helen won't have the money to pay the insurance premiums for that house anymore. And guess what happens then? Daisy swallowed hard, her throat as dry as a desert. Inspector Miller will come back, Daisy whispered, her voice shattered. He'll issue a demolition order. Exactly. Wilson nodded coldly. And this time, there will be no money to save it. Your mother's lifeline oak tree will be bulldozed along with the house. And the person driving that bulldozer, metaphorically speaking, is you, Daisy. Daisy spun toward Helen and rushed forward, collapsing to her knees beside her stepmother's chair. She clutched Helen's ice-cold hand. Helen, why didn't you tell me? Why did you suffer in silence like this? Daisy sobbed. I'm sorry, I was wrong. Helen slowly turned back. The look in her eyes was no longer cold or distant, but the profound exhaustion of someone who had carried the weight of the world for far too long. I promised your father, Daisy, Helen said softly, yet her words echoed in Daisy's mind. Ethan said you were very much like your mother. Determined, hot-headed, and full of love. He told me, don't explain. Let her feel it herself. When she understands, she'll love that house more than anyone. Helen withdrew her hand and gently wiped the mud from Daisy's cheek. But it seems we've run out of time. Your video was very effective. The Architecture Council just emailed me, summoning me tomorrow morning to explain my professional ethics. Chances are, I'll be suspended. No. Daisy sprang to her feet, shaking her head violently. It can't end like this. I'll fix it. I'll tell everyone the truth. It's too late, Helen said with a sad smile. Social media is a double-edged sword. Once you've thrown the blade, you can't take the wound back. Daisy looked at her phone screen. Notifications were still popping up non-stop. 2 million views. Thousands of insults aimed at Helen. Every single like, every share now felt like a sledgehammer crashing down on the slanted house, crashing down on the ancient oak tree, and crashing down on the only woman who had ever loved her in the quietest way. She had won the media battle, but she was standing on the brink of losing her entire life. Daisy clenched her phone, her eyes blazing with a mad determination. "I don't care whether it's too late or not," Daisy said, wiping away her tears as she turned to Lawyer Wilson. "Prepare the paperwork. I won't accept the inheritance the old way anymore. I'll take full responsibility." "What are you planning to do?" Helen frowned anxiously. Daisy didn't answer. She rushed out of the conference room and dialed Inspector Miller's number. She needed one final live stream. A live stream not to expose anyone, but to confess to the entire world, even if the price was her own ultimate humiliation. 9 o'clock in the morning. Inspector Miller's deadline had arrived. But instead of the roaring engines of bulldozers, the old forest today echoed only with birdsong and the whisper of wind through the pine canopy. In front of cabin No. 4, Daisy stood there, holding a phone mounted securely on a tripod. Across from her, Helen leaned against a tree trunk, her expression tense. She was no longer wearing her powerful white suit, but a simple cream-colored sweater, making her look smaller and far more human. "Are you sure about this, Daisy?" Helen asked, her voice trembling slightly, her eyes flicking to the rapidly rising viewer count on the phone screen. "If this backfires, my career will be over forever. Mithin. You risked your entire career to keep that tree for me," Daisy replied, taking a deep breath to steady her racing heart. "Now it's my turn to risk my ego to restore your honor." Daisy pressed the live button. Immediately, the viewer count jumped to 50,000, then 100,000. The whole world was waiting for the final act. They were waiting to see Daisy thrown out of the house, or the house sealed off. "Hello everyone," Daisy said into the lens, not using the sharp, sarcastic tone from her previous video. Her voice was low, serious, and raw. "My name is Daisy Vance. And I am a liar." The comment section exploded. Question marks flooded the screen. 3 days ago, I told you that my stepmother was an evil witch who forced me to live in a house about to collapse due to technical defects. I called on you to boycott her." Daisy stepped aside, revealing the entire house tilted at a 15-degree angle behind her. "But I was wrong. This house is not defective. And that woman is not a witch." Daisy picked up the phone and motioned for Helen to follow her. "Come on, Helen. Don't hide anymore. Show them your masterpiece." They walked down the path leading beneath the house. Daisy aimed the camera at the massive, glossy black steel beam system straining to support the enormous structure above. "Do you see this?" Daisy asked. "This is Type I high-strength steel. It costs 10 times more than concrete. And it's designed as a cantilever, suspending the house in midair." Then she panned the camera down into the deep pit, where the proud, winding roots of the ancient Gary oak spread out, the brass nameplate of her mother glinting in the morning sunlight. "This is the reason." Daisy's voice caught. "This is the oak tree my biological mother planted. Helen could have cut it down to build a straight house, saved millions of dollars, and kept her reputation safe. But she chose the hardest path. She bent the entire house, tilting it 15 degrees, just to make room for this tree to live." Daisy turned the camera toward Helen. For the first time, the public saw the Ice Queen Helen Vance standing awkwardly, her eyes reddened as she looked down at the ground. "She paid $120,000 a year in insurance just to keep her promise to my father," Daisy said, looking straight at Helen through the phone screen. "She chose to let me hate her, rather than let me feel indebted to her. That's the responsibility of an architect, Daisy." Helen spoke up, her voice small but firm. "Architecture is not about imposing concrete onto nature. Architecture is coexistence. This house is not perfect, it tilts, it's difficult to live in, but it knows how to bow before sacred values. 1. The comments on the screen began to change. The insults disappeared, replaced by heart emojis, apologies, and amazement. "Oh my God, I'm crying. This is true art. Sorry, Helen Vance. We were wrong." Daisy smiled, a relieved smile. "So don't call this a defective house anymore. Call it a house that knows how to love. And if anyone still wants to demolish it." Daisy stared straight into the lens with the blazing eyes of a protector. "You'll have to step over my dead body." She ended the live stream. Silence returned to the forest. Helen exhaled deeply, leaning back against a steel column as if shedding a 1,000-pound burden. Daisy lowered the arm holding the phone, letting the screen fade to black. The space beneath the house suddenly became utterly still, with only the rustling of oak leaves, like whispers from the past. Helen remained standing there, her back against the cold steel column, her thin shoulders trembling slightly. She hurriedly wiped her eyes, trying to regain her usual composure, but the mask of the steel woman had completely shattered after Daisy's act of protection. Daisy stepped forward, each step slow but firm, closing the invisible distance that had separated them for 10 long years. She stopped right in front of Helen and looked deeply into the brown eyes shimmering with tears. For the first time, Daisy did not see an arrogant architect, but a woman who had silently endured rejection to keep a promise intact. "All this time, I thought you wanted to take everything Dad left behind," Daisy said, her voice wavering with emotion. She took a deep breath, letting the most important, most sacred word she had buried for so long finally escape. "But it turns out you were the only one who kept everything most genuine in this family." Helen froze, her eyes widening in disbelief. "Daisy, you just called me." "I'm sorry," Daisy cut in, hot tears streaming down her face. She looked straight at the woman before her, her eyes filled with remorse and gratitude. "I'm sorry, Mom. Mom." The word mom rang out, shattering the final barrier. Helen broke down sobbing, no longer holding back. Daisy rushed forward, and the two women, one old, one young, one a stepmother, one a stepdaughter, clung tightly to each other amid the rigid steel beams. Helen held Daisy close, burying her face in the girl's tangled hair, feeling the warmth of family she had long yearned for. The house above them still tilted defiantly at 15 degrees, but in that very moment, beneath the ancient oak tree, their relationship had finally stood upright, stronger than any block of concrete. Lesson drawn from the story. Behind things that seem like flaws or oddities, such as the slanted house, there often lies a great love and silent sacrifice. Helen accepted infamy to protect a keepsake of the deceased, proving that genuine love sometimes needs no eloquent words, but is shown through patience and quiet endurance. In the end, only when we are willing to lower our ego to listen and understand can misunderstandings be resolved, making way for true reconciliation and love.